Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 57 of I Wish You Were Dead, a podcast about things that used to be alive. My name is Mike, and that is Gavin, and this is not going to be one of our good episodes.
No, it really isn't. So today on this episode, we're going to be discussing the movie The VelociPastor, which is even better.
Can you say that one more time? Can you break that down? Like, what word did you just say?
So the word is the.
Okay,
and then,
not the word I was talking about.
Okay, but VelociPastor, which is a pun on the words velociraptor and pastor, for reasons that are way dumber than you're thinking. This is an excellent pun, which I'll explain later, or like the origination of this pun, because this is a movie that came out in, depending on how you count it, 2017, 2018, or 2019. Which I'll talk about a little bit more too. But I will say very upfront. So this movie is rated 16 plus. So if you were not that age, I would not recommend you go watch this movie. There's really nothing bad in it. There's a little bit of foul language, and then there is a sex scene, but people remain clothed the whole time. You don't actually really see anything.
That song they played during that scene, though, like that was, I kind of
the soundtrack to this movie slaps so hard. And so
in case you haven't heard, or in case you can't tell by now, this is just going to be Gavin and I just going back and forth on what is a bad movie. And one of my favorite things is to watch bad movies with people.
Yeah. So very clearly, though, I want to establish very early, I did not watch this movie before.
Neither of us did.
But I had this on the list for a while because I had seen it. I think like somebody mentioned it on Twitter or something, and I was like, interesting, I'm going to look that up. And then I looked it up enough to like have clicked on the Wikipedia page before and then not actually read it. But it's been on the list of podcast episodes for a while. And so I hadn't watched it beforehand. The poster is rather misleading as to the budget, I guess, of this movie. Which I didn't expect it to be a high budget movie. Right.
The budget didn't exist as far as I can tell for this movie.
Right, and so if you watch it you can watch this movie for free if you have Amazon Prime, or if you don't, if you just have an Amazon account, you can probably rent it for like $3. Or
you actually do not even need an Amazon account, as I found out. You can watch it for free on archive.org.
Or there's also a version on YouTube as well. I don't know how legal that is, but
you can watch this movie if you want to see it. And fortunately, it's only about an hour and 10 minutes.
Yeah,
which is a nice length for we're gonna watch this as a joke. But it's not going to take up too much of our time. So it really fits. It scratches a couple of those itches.
See, and it's actually a little convenient because I didn't really have to work that hard for this episode. And spoilers, next week's episode is going to be pretty dense, but it was requested. So they gave me a little extra time to put some effort into next episode. So hopefully next episode will be suitably good to make up for it. So if you aren't interested in learning about dumb movies that have even less to do with paleontology than you would think a movie called VelociPastor would have, then this probably isn't the episode for you. We'll see you next week.
And we do not hold that against you. It's all good.
No, not at all. This movie is absolutely not for everybody.
Not sure who it is for, except for you and me, but...
Oh, Liz also absolutely loved it. But we'll talk about that.
That's why you're about to marry her.
Exactly. So anyway, as per usual, for the more paleontology-focused episode instead of the history episode, we have a Today in History, Mike.
Yeah, and we went with a one that was a little bit less like politics-focused, but again, a Today in History. So January 12th in history, in the year 1969, very nice, the New York Jets, my New York Jets, won Super Bowl number 3. That was the only Super Bowl they have ever won. It's the only thing we can cling on to. But Broadway Joe Namath says that he guaranteed a win, and on that day they beat the Baltimore Colts. Yeah, they won. He was drunk when he made that guarantee. But in 1969, the Jets won the Super Bowl, and interestingly enough, the Mets also won the World Series. Which
that same year,
yeah.
Wow,
so
great year.
If that could ever happen again, I know. If that could ever happen again, for the Mets and the Jets, I don't know
You
what
know,
I would do, but I wouldn't have
as
any more
somebody
reason
who,
to continue living
yeah,
because that's my whole purpose. That
as
would be my
somebody
whole purpose.
somebody who likes to hate on the Mets, um, but as somebody who loves New York, even though I don't live there anymore, I would take that. If a Mets win was conditional on a Jets win as well, I would be okay with that, just so that New York could brag about how great it is. Like it doesn't do that already, but uh, yeah,
I don't know. I feel like
I
New
would take
York is
that.
kind of falling behind the times to like Boston and Tampa Bay. Like, I don't
Oh
know.
no,
New
I'm just
York
saying
sports
people
haven't been
people
great
from New
recently.
York generally just brag about how great New York is to
This is true.
everybody who's not from there, even though
This is true.
nobody that I talk to that lives in New York actually likes it. They'll tell other people that it's better than where they live, but they also will be like, at the same time, I hate New York.
It's a weird dynamic, but I know
It really
exactly what you're
is.
talking about.
Anyway, so the VelociPastor. About 5 minutes into watching this movie, I text Mike, and all I said was, "This movie effing rules," because it
Yep.
does. This is the epitome of a so bad it's good. At least in my mind. I think most people would just say, no, this is a bad, dumb movie that shouldn't have been made.
I wouldn't go quite as far as you. I don't want to say that it is the epitome of so bad it's good, but it definitely is like a strong contender in that category of so bad it's good.
So,
Definitely one to put on the list if you're going for a bad movie.
yes, absolutely. And especially because it's only an hour. Uh,
Right.
so, this movie was written, directed, produced, and edited by a person named Brendan Steer. And so he was in film school when he came up with the idea for this movie. And this is a direct quote from the Wikipedia page. The director thought of the idea in 2010 while he was attending the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan, which is, a very prestigious like film school. After his phone autocorrected Velociraptor to VelociPastor.
Why did his phone do that? We'll never know.
We'll never know. It was 2010. Phones didn't really know how to work yet. It said, as a class project, Steer made a short film of fake grindhouse trailers, which included the VelociPastor. And he put that trailer on YouTube, which he had a prior channel, but each video only got around 45 views. This one got 1,000 times that, at least whenever in the time frame that they were talking about here. So
Right.
45,000 views, which in 2010 YouTube was not nothing. Um, and he was like, "Oh, I guess people would like this as a whole movie. Why not?" Uh, so uh, the budget for this film, I've seen quoted by various sources, is anywhere from $35,000 to $45,000, which
I can
a,
believe that. I mean,
a
that might be
low
overshooting it, but
budget.
yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say a low budget movie. I was talking to actually one of my coworkers who, is pretty into film. Like he wrote for a couple film websites previously. Um, and he was like, a low budget movie is like around $10 million.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
this
Wow.
is
Okay.
this is 2 orders of magnitude smaller than that. So uh, we're gonna go through a rough plot. Um, oh, and
Obviously, in case you haven't heard by this point, just like spoilers, I don't really like. I don't think it matters whether you
no,
watch this movie before or after, or not at all, and just hear us discuss it.
yeah,
But just if you're the kind of person that wants to watch the movie first, now would be a great time to turn off the podcast and go fire it up. We'll try and have a link in the show notes
yeah,
so you can go watch that movie.
yeah, absolutely. And so also earlier when I said that this was, depending on how you count it, either released in 2017, 2018, or 2019. So like I said, he came up with the idea in 2010. Um, but he sort of premiered it in various places. So it was first premiered at a screening of the B Movie Underground and Trash Film Festival on August 31st, 2018, and then released, out to the broader internet in August of 2019. So I don't know where they got the 2017 from. but that's what it says on Wikipedia. Anyway, so
Mhm.
I'm going to go through a quick synopsis. I'm mostly just going to read from Wikipedia with me interjecting every now and then, because I took some notes on the movie about my favorite parts. And if you remember any of your favorite parts, Mike, feel free to chime in. So, Catholic priest Doug Jones witnesses his parents die in a car fire. That was the first minute of the movie.
And this is where I know we're only a minute and a half in now, but this is where the movie got me because of
Yes,
on such a low
same.
budget, the amazing special effects that were
So,
used.
yes. So,
I had to like do a double
actually,
take with that.
I skipped a thing because that's how the one on Wikipedia starts. My little synopsis that I wrote. So at the 20-second mark, before anything else shows up on screen, it says X rated, and then that's all it says on the screen for about a second, and then underneath it says by an all Christian jury.
I believe that.
Yeah, which, like I said, this movie is rated as I think 16 plus on however Amazon does its ratings. Also, this movie sort of playfully dislikes Christianity. That is not the stance of this podcast. Just want to make that clear. So the first dialogue was basically Doug waving to his mom and dad. He gave some little brief sermon, comes out, waved to his mom and dad. They wave back. And then it cuts back to Doug, our protagonist. And an explosion happens off screen. It cuts back to where the parents' car was.
Where it
And it
should be.
literally just says, yes, where it should be. And it just says text on the screen. It says VFX : car on fire.
Like literally,
That's it. Literally, yeah, the regular scene, but it's like they just moved the car, so it's just an empty street, and just over top of it, VFX car on fire, and
which really tells you the kind of movie you're watching just right away in case there was any kind of questions. Like, okay, we know what we're dealing with here.
well, and my favorite thing about that wasn't just that. It was at that point that I think I actually text Mike and was like, "This movie rules," uh, but so it shows that, cuts back to Doug, him being like, "Mom, Dad, no," cuts back to the text of saying VFX car on fire. It does that like 2 or 3 times. So it's like I
Yep,
mean,
they're really driving that point home.
exactly. And that's the entire first minute and a half of this movie. And the very next line, so he's a priest at a Catholic church, and so he comes back. The very next
Do we
line
know it's
after that,
Catholic or is it just um,
I
or is it just some
assume,
sort of Christian
well,
denomination?
I assume that it's Catholic, and also Liz, who was raised Catholic, also was like, yeah, most of this seems pretty Catholic.
Yeah, and on the
It's not
Wikipedia
like a
article it does
great
say.
representation of it, but
You don't say, Gavin. On the
we'll get
Wikipedia
there.
article
We'll
does
get
say
there.
Catholic as well, so
Oh, okay.
we'll assume Catholic priest for the purposes of this video, or this podcast. But
Mm-hmm.
regardless, a priest.
The very next line after his parents die, another priest, Father Stewart, who we will talk about a decent amount, very next line of dialogue says, "So your parents died, Doug. That's what parents do. They die on you."
Yeah, real comforting.
That's the next piece of dialogue. So they're also seen drinking the communion wine at this point. Like Doug is like drinking his stars away with the communion wine, which Liz thought was very funny.
Yes, just opening up and like pouring it in there.
Yep. Which okay, so this is what my notes say. Characters are seen drinking the communion wine, which my Catholic raised fiance tells me is not what it's for. I don't know. I've never really been to a Catholic church, so the
Bite my
Father
tongue on that one and move on.
Yeah. Father Stewart tells
it's
Doug,
been a little bit, and Mom, I don't apologize.
Father Stewart basically gives him the advice to go on a journey and travel to find himself. And he basically says, go where God will not follow. And if you find him there, then, he's real, or something to that effect. So he travels to China, which is very clearly not China. It looks a lot like the woods that I grew up running around in when I was a kid.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I don't know China quite well enough. Like maybe there's a part of China
Like, I'm
that looks
sure,
like that, but
yes, but it's like they
there was
return to
nothing.
that exact same spot of forest. They return to that
Yes,
exact same spot several times throughout the movie, and it is no longer supposed to be China.
it definitely looks like they just like found a forest. There was nothing uniquely
Yeah,
Chinese about
it
this, so I
it
definitely had that
looks
same
like
thought.
it could have been Central Park, honestly. Um, so oh yeah, it goes through the credit sequence while he's traveling, and it's literally just a montage of him in a car. The credit sequence is amazing. That song slaps so hard. Um, and it's literally just a montage of him driving somewhere, and then he gets out of the car and he's just in China. Uh, so
Yes.
the word China scrolls across the screen so that you know that that's where they are, and he optimistically just nods and says China and walks out of frame.
Very,
Really,
very oddly. Yeah.
just driving it home. Um, and then he comes across a woman that had just been shot with an arrow. She was running away from a ninja, which ninjas, to my knowledge, are Japanese. But that's neither here nor there. But oh, I mostly most of my notes are literally just quotes from the movie because this is a very quotable movie. Me and Liz watched it about a week ago, and we've just been quoting it to each other for the last week.
Hmm.
So, but before he encounters the ninjas, he's holding what I think is a compass. But he looks down at it and says,
Yeah. Yes.
"China
This.
is east," and then
Yeah.
just walks out of frame again. I'm like, were you doubting that? Oh, there's a truck.
Oh, you know what? That's fine. If there was ever going to be an episode with a truck in it, I am into it. So, but this is an important part of the movie, though, when he's in China and
It is.
realizes
It
that
sets
China's
up the rest of the
east.
plot. Yeah. So this woman was running away from a ninja. She gets shot through the chest with an arrow. There was an arrow sticking out of her chest. She falls and rolls down a hill. He holds like right in front of him. He picks her up in her arms and says, "Are you hurt?" She's wearing a white like gi or kimono esque piece of clothing covered in blood, and he just says, "Are you hurt?" And I'm like, "Oh, this is the best acting I've ever seen."
Yeah,
Uh,
right. With an arrow coming out of her chest, blood,
yeah,
blood everywhere. Are you
including
hurt?
coming out of her mouth. Like she's
Yes.
clearly dead, like dying. Uh, she hands him a dinosaur tooth and says, "Dragon Warrior," and then dies. The ninja who shot her with the arrow pops out of like behind a tree or something. He gets scared, or Doug gets scared and like falls down a hill. The dinosaur tooth cuts him across his hand. He becomes unconscious, and then wakes up back wherever his church is. He wakes up back in his church. So that is the opening of the movie, more or less. And the next line from Father Stewart. Father Stewart, comes in, wakes him up, and this is a quote from the movie. This is not any reflective of this podcast. So Father Stewart says, "What did that Chinese say?"
Yeah, that was right.
Not
There,
great.
I mean, we mentioned the whole thing with ninjas before. Like, there's some casual racism going on in this movie, and you know what? I imagine it'll be hard to avoid that with a whole lot of bad movies.
Yeah.
We're not supporting it, we're not endorsing it, but you know what? That it's a thing that
Well,
happened.
right, and it gets a little worse. Maybe not worse, but it coasts. To which Doug replies, "Dragon Warrior," and then Father Stewart says, "How
Hmm.
Eastern?" He just says, "How Eastern," and and then just leaves the room. There's a lot of really good comedic exits though that I very well timed, and I can really appreciate comedic timing. But
Yes.
um, so Doug basically is having a nightmare of killing people and being hungry, and that's what he and Father Stewart are talking about. He goes outside to catch some air, even though so he's inside clearly at nighttime, and then when he goes outside to catch some air, it is just broad daylight. Sure. Um, and then we cut away from Doug as he's sort of running around outside, out in the wilderness of some city. I don't know. So we cut away from Doug and we go to a pimp.
Yeah, and this is like the next probably 5 minutes of the movie are, probably the most crucial. They kind of set everything else up for what's
They
about to
sure
happen.
do. So we cut to a pimp named Frankie Mermaid.
And why is he
And
called Frankie Mermaid, Gavin?
so this is again a direct quote. I'm going to swear here. Um not badly, but um so he makes one the female lead, whose name is Carol. Um he says, "What's my name?" And she says, "Frankie Mermaid." And he says, "And why do people call me that?" And she says, "Because you're swimming in bitches." Um so again, just continuing with the theme of what kind of movie this is going to be. So,
Yes.
um, Frankie tells Carol that she's going to be working in the park tonight. Apparently, that is the place to make a lot of money, according to Frankie. Sure, who am I to question him? So then we cut to Carol in the park, which I know to generally not be a great place to go at night, but that's just me. And so she gets snuck up on by some kind of thug, and uh, Doug kind of he sees this, and then suddenly it turns into a Velociraptor.
Yeah, it's a real quick. Just
Very
there's
quick. So
danger,
there's
and
not
then
a sequence of it. There's no like real transformation sequence. You just see him sort of screaming in pain. I'm assuming that it's rather painful to turn into a dinosaur. Um,
hmm
and there's a quote here between Carol and the thug guy who's gonna like mug her or something. She just says, "He'll kill you," referring to Frankie. And then the thug just replies, "That makes two of us."
not really sure what they were going
What
for
does
with
that
that one.
mean?
Yeah, does that mean like he was
Again,
gonna kill himself too,
I don't know. I think it's just
or
supposed
he
to be a
was gonna
dumb
kill
throwaway line,
Frankie?
but I thought
Yeah,
it was
I
very
don't know.
funny.
Right? Yes.
So Doug, as a dinosaur, Dino Doug, attacks the thug. I'm rhyming, and uh, basically gets him away from Carol, chews his leg really badly, and the thug has a pistol and is like shooting it, basically having to cock back the top of it every time, but it's not like a revolver. And I have in my notes, I'm like, that's not how pistols work. Uh, so Doug kills this guy, and at some point, a mannequin head, very clearly a mannequin head, just rolls by
Yep.
Carol. So Doug ripped off his head, and
Will not
then
be the only time this happens.
no, it is not. Doug wakes up in Carol's bed, which was a twin bed, which I thought was really funny, personally.
Yes.
Just because I'm like, that's a college bed.
Yep.
It looked like a college dorm room, except later people come in through the windows, so it must not have actually been a college. But yeah, so he wakes up in her bed shirtless. She walks in very flirtatiously, and the person that he says to her is, "Hello, my child." Um, she says many things that sort of suggest that they slept together. However, she was just referring to him turning into a dinosaur. She was like, "Last
hmm
night was amazing." Like that was I think it was the first thing she said to him.
Yep.
Um, she takes him to see the body because he didn't believe her. He doesn't remember when he turns into a dinosaur. So she takes him to see the body at literally the exact same piece of forest that they used for the China scene.
hmm
um, so Carol basically tries to convince him to use this to fight crime. She was like, "You can do way more good with this than you ever could as a priest." Um, at which point she reveals to him that she was a sex worker, which he, being a priest, does not like. Um, and then she also says, "I'm also pre-med law, but people aren't nearly as surprised about that." Um,
Yes. Pre-med law.
Pre-med law is what she says, and then later in the same
Is
scene,
that a
she
thing?
says,
Is that a
"No,
thing?
no." Um, and then, well, because later a direct quote, she says, "There's surprisingly low demand for hooker doctor lawyers," which, yeah, I would say that's probably an accurate statement, I guess.
You think so?
Yeah. Anywho, so Doug does not
Gavin's just
want.
gonna skip right over that one.
I sure am. The next scene, Doug is doesn't want anything to do with this. he doesn't want to fight crime with it. He still kind of doesn't believe that it happened. And so he's like, I need to go do my confessions. He's late for doing his confessions because he's still, a priest. And so, oh yeah,
The best way I can
it's
describe
definitely
this
Catholic because they're
is,
doing confessions.
yes, the best way I can describe the way he's feeling right now is kind of like Scott Calvin the morning after he's first Santa Claus, where like he has the memory of it, and people are,
Yeah.
the little boy's telling him and everything, but he doesn't want to believe. Like he is choosing not to believe it and to continue his life in spite of the evidence until it becomes too much, which we see here at confession.
Right. So he, that's something that Carol brought up when she was trying to convince him to not be a priest and to fight crime with this instead. She was like basically saying, if people like profess crimes to you or whatever during confession, you can't do anything about it. It's like if somebody told you during your confession that they murdered somebody, you couldn't do anything about it. You just let that. I think she just said something to the effect of, you just let those scumbags walk away. She's like, you don't have to do that anymore. Which I don't know the validity of that for a priest. That sounds like a church thing. I don't know.
I can never keep it straight.
Yeah, I don't know. But so regardless, he goes back to do his confessions, and the first person to go to his confession, surprise, surprise, is Frankie Mermaid. And so, very enjoyable scene. Frankie Mermaid is actually very charismatic. I think he's very funny. But during this, he reveals that Frankie was the one that killed Doug's parents. Doug gets very mad and kills him.
Yeah, just imagine the scenario here. First off, Frankie's smoking during all this.
Yeah, he's smoking during the confession.
During confession, and he says he reveals that he kills Frankie's what's his name?
Doug.
Yeah, thank you. He kills Doug's parents. Doug is the guy, like the priest, the one that is doing the confession. So he's confessing to killing that guy's parent. You can imagine.
Well, and he's like bragging about it
problem.
Too. He was like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "Oh, I bet you know him." Some guy came out yelling, "Mom, Dad," like they were his parents or something.
Right.
And so Doug's hands turn into dinosaur hands, which is just him wearing gloves, and he crashes through the confessional thing and kills him very graphically. He goes and tells Carol that he killed Frankie. She thanks him a lot because now she's, no longer under his pimpitude. I don't know what to call that. And during this,
I can't.
I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that.
Oh man, I love where it wound up though. Keep going.
During this exchange, Carol says, "I don't know much about God," to which Doug replies, "I don't know much about dinosaurs." Again, just excellent line. During this scene, there's a lot of very romantic cuts and sort of, sexy eyes from one of them to the other. And then they just high five, which again, I was like, this movie's amazing.
100%.
And then there is a workout / murder montage of Doug working out and then also learning to like get control of his dinosaur powers, I guess. They at some point he kills a guy for littering in the park. Cool.
Right.
There's also an obligatory 1980s fist pump in the workout montage. And then we cut to a little bit of revealing what the actual plot's going to be, because it's not just an adventure of him going around killing litterers. It cuts to sort of a ninja camp with pretty much only white ninjas. Like, they're very clearly just white guys in Skechers. And that's basically just to establish, hey, here, it shows us the main bad guy. We get a little bit of exposition, but it's not important until later. So we cut back to the church, and Doug is, he's been missing some things at church, while fighting crime, and Father Stewart's getting concerned with him. And he basically, gets him to confess, I have these powers now. I can turn into a dinosaur. I can actually help people, at least, in his mind. And there's at some point an obligatory joke, I guess it's obligatory, about priests being gay. Because I think Doug
Yeah,
says, I'm
it was
different.
subtle, right?
Yeah, well, it was, I think Doug says,
Hmm.
I'm different, referring to his newfound powers. To which Father Stewart replies, that's okay, Doug. A lot of people in the church are. And then Doug cuts him off and he's like, no, not like that. So we're going to move on from that.
Yep.
And during most of this scene, Father Stewart is drinking the communion wine as well. Uh,
Yeah.
then there's, when Doug is sort of trying to justify his actions to Father Stewart, saying, I can, punish people. He's like, what if these powers are a gift from God? And quotes a couple different Bible verses about like punishing the wicked or something. And at one point, Father Stewart says, God does not want people dead. And then in my notes, I literally have, LOL, has he read the Old Testament? Isn't that most of what God did? Like after Genesis was like kill
Again,
people?
not a
Again, I'm
Bible
not a
scholar,
Bible
but
scholar. No,
yeah,
not
my
at all.
understanding is
But
that the Old Testament, there's a lot, not a whole lot of things that would normally be considered, good Christian morals are going on there within the Old Testament.
well, I mean, Christ wasn't born yet. It's
Well, you know
the
what?
Old Testament. Anyway,
There you go.
um,
I don't know how any of this works.
so
Mom, I'm not sorry.
I don't remember how we get to this, but we get to a flashback of Doug, and
Well,
some
hold
things
on,
from
just
his
really
life.
quick with the
Sure,
flashbacks. This happens more than once.
it does.
I don't understand how how any of these flashbacks happen. They go on for several minutes,
They
and
do.
I don't understand how any of them happened or why they happened. They were funny usually, but
I
just the
think for
flashbacks
this one, the
were.
one later makes absolutely no sense, but I loved every second of it.
Mhm.
We'll talk about it when we get there. But this one I think was about just establishing a bit of Doug's backstory about why he wanted to become a priest, and then his parents dropping him off at quote priest college. Uh,
Yes. Yes.
um, and during this time, and it's very important. Doug's parents refer to him as their only son, and his dad tells when they drop him off at priest college, uh, tell him how proud of him they are for wanting to help people.
Yes.
So during that entire exchange, Father Stewart decided that Doug needed to have an exorcism because clearly there was some demon inside of him that was causing him to do this.
Which
So
yeah.
sure, yeah, I mean that's a very reasonable thing to do. If I were a priest, that's probably what I would have done as well. So they, Doug, for whatever reason, just goes with him. I don't know. So they go see somebody that Father Stewart knew from Vietnam because apparently Father Stewart was in the Vietnam War. And because we're talking about Vietnam, there's another flashback, and these are within a couple seconds of or probably a minute, 2 minutes of each other. So we have a Vietnam flashback with Father Stewart in the same forest that we've seen a couple times. And Father Stewart, despite this being presumably close to 40, maybe 50 years prior to this, Father Stewart is the exact same. He's just wearing a shaggy blonde wig.
Yep.
And so basically just goes through a little bit of his time in Vietnam, including his war buddy Ali. And basically Father Stewart establishes that he had a wife, that he was going to start a family when he got home. And Ali was like, you're going to have 5 kids, 11 kids, and you're going to name one of them after me.
Yep.
War buddy Ali. The only guy to go through the war without a scratch. And then immediately gets shot and killed. And even though
right in front of him. Just,
right in front of Father Stewart, during the time while he is laying on the ground dead, he has a cigarette in his mouth and he continues to smoke it, like he's just actively blowing smoke out of his mouth when he's supposed to be dead, which again I thought was hilarious. He's they buried Ali, and there's a couple other soldiers around, and then as Father Stewart is mourning his war buddy, his wife.
This might be the best part of the movie.
His wife, who is for some reason in Vietnam, comes running to him, calling his name.
It's going to be a great moment.
right as she's about to jump in his arms, she steps on a grenade and gets blown up and explodes blood all over him. And the other soldiers like wonder aloud. They were like, I wonder what she was doing in Vietnam.
Yeah,
I guess
and then they were
we'll
like,
never know.
yeah, I don't think there's anything we can do for her now. She looks pretty
Yeah.
far gone at this point.
Yeah.
As there is
As
nothing but
no.
blood. There,
I think she had an arm. I think there was an arm.
maybe there was not much actual body left at this
No.
point.
It literally
And the whole
looks like
time,
somebody took like a vat of like thickened red water, or like a 5-gallon drum, and just splashed it right on the front of Father Stewart. Like his entire front is covered in this fake blood, not
and
just
this
a
whole time
little,
he's
like
just
a
standing
lot.
there. He's
Yeah.
just standing there, not saying anything. Just it.
Yeah.
That I don't have words for that one. Just the fake build up to
It
something
was
magical.
it was so funny. Like I said, there was
Yep.
no reason for this Vietnam scene to be in here, because I think
No,
so
it
how it
serves nothing
starts.
to the plot, as far as
No,
I can tell.
not at all. So how it started was, like I said, the guy doing the exorcism, who apparently used to be a priest. They mentioned that, like, I think in one line, and that's it. But Father Stewart knew him from the war, and then I think he says, "I haven't seen Altair," the name of the guy doing the exorcism, since the war, and then goes to the flashback. So they cut back to the present. They're doing the exorcism, and which brings out the dinosaur in Doug, turns him into the dinosaur. He rips out one of Father Stewart's eyes, runs away, and Altair just laughs maniacally, and we never see him again. Although the exorcism guy, I really enjoyed. I thought he was a really funny character as well.
I mean,
But
the Exorcist guy looks like if you were going to have someone play the character of Satan.
oh yeah,
He just looks like Satan. Like that's
I
the
agree.
best way I can describe it.
Uh,
I've nothing to add on that. Just Satan.
let's see. So my notes aren't particularly helpful for what happens next. It just says an Australian ninja ?
Yeah, like I mean, so here's the thing, is that there's a decent amount of this movie at this point that just starts to blend together, where people are doing bad things and then he turns into a velociraptor and kills it. Like it.
Yep.
There was at this point there is, and if you want to say there's a lull in the movie, it's probably around here. Somewhere between like halfway to 2/3 into the movie, where it's like, okay, we're seeing a lot of the same things happening again, and so you would be forgiven if your notes were not entirely clear, because my memory certainly is not clear either.
No. Let's see. So, yeah, it's just, I think as he's escaping the exorcism, he's attacked by ninjas, one of whom is Australian. And one of them, who I think is the only, not that, ninjas have to be Asian, but I think the person who's the only person of Asian descent who is a ninja in the movie, is off sort of daydreaming while the Australian ninja's just sort of talking in the background. And at one point in the background, I think the only line that I could actually hear the Australian say was, "I'm pretty sure dinosaurs can't look up." Sure.
Yeah, fine.
All three of them die very quickly to Velociraptor Doug.
VelociPastor Doug.
Yes. So Doug returns to Carol because he doesn't have anywhere else to go at this point, because he thinks that he killed Father Stewart. And he's basically like, I'm ready to fight crime. And to which this is when the clothed sex scene happens, featuring another very, very good song. Like I said, the music in this movie is very good. And that's completely unironic. I really, really enjoy the soundtrack to this movie.
This was the one song that stuck out to me. I usually, with things like that, I have to watch a movie a few times to get a real good sense of it.
Mm-hmm.
But this one particular song that goes on during the implied sex scene is like, it was like, oh, that's a banger. I would listen to that. Like, I want to. Well, I'm not going to finish that sentence, but like, I want to listen to that song.
During this, montage of a implied sex scene, there's also like a recreation of like the famous like Michelangelo like hand reaching for God.
Yes,
thing.
I forgot about that, but yes,
so funny. Anyway, They cut to the next morning. Ninjas break into Carol's bedroom. They beat them. Carol and Doug, without turning into a velociraptor, somehow beat the ninjas. And even though they're all three ninjas are already unconscious, Carol then does like a superhero pose where she's like squatting with one hand on the ground and one hand up, sort of like Black
Hmm.
Widow commonly does, and then just stands up. So everything's fine. And uh, then they kiss, and then it cuts back to the ninja camp for a little more exposition. So the bad guy, like the bad guy plot in this movie, which has not been clear up to this point, is established because we see Father Stewart in this camp. We don't know how he got there, and that's also never explained how he ended up in this camp. But he wakes up with
It's
an
not
eye
important.
patch. No,
Yes.
wakes up with an eye patch because Doug did actually rip out his eye. Like that happened. Um, Wakes up in this camp with the big bad guy, who Father Stewart speaks to him in English, and the bad guy speaks back in what I think is supposed to be Mandarin, but like it also, granted, I do not speak Mandarin, and some of it sounded good or like an actual language. Other parts did not. Um, but I think it's supposed to be Mandarin. And even though they are not speaking the same language, they just kind of understand each other. Like there's no translator. There's one speaks one language, one speaks another, and they just go back and forth like a normal conversation. Sure. Even though
Hmm.
it's established that the bad guy does speak English later. um, and so the whole bad guy plot is to get the city hooked on cocaine, cut off the supply so that they will turn to help groups held at the church, converting them to Christianity because the bad guys are also Christians.
This feels like a very odd, and I just taught this a month or two ago in my class. This feels like a very odd version of the Opium Wars that took place in China. Like,
Kinda? Yeah.
like it, obviously, like no, not really, but like a
No.
little bit.
So yeah, that is the bad guy's plot. And obviously Father Stewart, being pretty much the only like decent character in the movie.
And to be
um
clear, decent. He seems like an alcoholic, but so fine. He seems
right, he
fine.
also was casually drinking the communion wine, but
Yeah.
um basically was like, no, you can't do this. That's not what Christianity is about. Um, and then the bad guy kills him, like for real this time. And so, yeah, I guess that's the inciting plot of the movie. um, Cut back to Doug and Carol in Carol's bedroom, and there's a Doug voiceover that says, "Good thing that ninja told us where the hideout was before he died." Which he did not. We see him die. Like, Doug asks him, "Why are you attacking us?" And he says, "I'll never tell you," and then dies. But it's just a good thing that Ninja
Mhm.
told us where the hideout was before he died. In my notes, parentheses, he did no such thing.
I was gonna say I was lost here, and I was just willing to write it off, but I'm glad I was not alone.
No, you were not. Which I don't know if that was we didn't think about that. We shot it wrong, and we don't want to go back and reshoot it, or if they did it on purpose. Either one is
Right.
equally plausible. I'm actually leaning toward they did it on purpose, but um, so
I would believe that.
they get to the hideout because now, like I said, uh, Doug is inspired, wants to fight crime. He has nunchucks for some reason instead of just turning into a dinosaur immediately. I don't know. And so we've seen the main sidekick of the big bad guy, who I believe on Wikipedia is listed as Sam the White Ninja. That is the name of his character. Sure. And let's see. Sam, this ninja, reveals himself to actually be Doug's brother. Dun dun dun.
Which brings us back to a callback, and this is one of the only flashbacks I understood.
Yes. So it cuts back to the couple of scenes that Doug had a flashback before with him and his parents. And it just like sort of pans away because one of the scenes is Sam and his parents at like a dinner table, not saying anything, but just like laughing, having a general good time with one empty plate. And then it sort of just pans and you see Sam just sort of standing off to the side, not with the family.
Doesn't the dad at one point say like "You're my only son" or something
Yes.
to that
So
effect?
when
Okay.
they drop Doug off at Priest College,
Oh, that was at the
um,
car. Okay, okay.
yeah, Doug gets out of the car after his dad says, "You're my only son. I'm so proud of you." So Doug gets out of the car, and then Sam was crouching in the back the whole time, and so he just pops his head up, looking sad and angry. Uh, so he was there the whole time, and I think he's the most sympathetic character, and also one of the best, because throughout every time you see him, he's trying to like perfect an evil laugh, and it's just really bad at it. Which I thought that running joke throughout the movie, because this is the third or fourth time that we've seen him, and he
It's
does that
endearing.
every time. Yeah, it's
Hmm.
very endearing. I liked him a lot. Um, so he has a sword, which he says was from his ancestors. Okay, but throws it down because he says the sword was given to me by my ancestors, and I don't want to taint it with your blood or something to that effect. Doug fights Sam, while Carol, who can also suddenly fight, like we never see her training at all, but she fights three other ninjas while Doug is fighting just Sam.
Yes. Doug, the person that is also a velociraptor in addition to being a pastor. Just taking out
Yes.
one.
Yep. So they fight for a little bit, and then Sam goes to get the sword anyway, but then Doug just like reaches his hand out and the sword flies into his hand. And Doug
Because of
says,
course it does.
"Your ancestors are my ancestors," because obviously they're brothers.
I was gonna say
But
that was
that's
one of those things
never
that's like
explained.
that was like it's supposed to be like a real deep line that comes at the end of the film that like Luke, I am your father. Like, but it's just like no, we have the same parents. Like our parents banged and then like a couple years later they
Well,
banged again.
see
Like
that's the thing that that's whatever. The thing with the sword, so Sam like sticks it in the ground, so the point is in the ground. And so it's not like, he threw it at Doug. Like it's stuck in the ground. Doug reaches his hand out and it flies from the ground into his hand. And that is just never brought up again. Sure. Um, I don't know why that's the problem I have with this movie. I don't know. But, God, where am I in my notes? Um, he kills Sam. So, like, for real, just straight up kills him. And Carol, who has been fighting these three other ninjas the whole time, gets stabbed by a really tall ninja who comes out. You know how there's always, like, I think in the first Indiana Jones movie, there's like a really big guy who, that whole shtick of like the single big bad guy who's like a foot taller than everybody else. Uh,
right, you know the one.
yeah. Carol gets stabbed by him. And as Sam, or as Doug runs over to her, holds her in his arms, and she essentially dies. All of the ninjas sort of like hug each other in the background and are sad because she's a protagonist.
Hmm.
Um, but the loss of his loved one is what finally makes Doug turn into a dinosaur. He fights and defeats all the rest of the ninjas, and then the big bad guy comes out. But really quickly, this dinosaur suit. We'll talk about it a little bit more after I go through the synopsis, because I want to throw a little bit of paleontology in this episode. Um, there's a big hole because I couldn't tell if this was a suit that was bought or one that was made. It could go either way. I don't really know, but there's a big hole like between the legs that you like put the suit over top of you in, right? And so Liz pauses the movie and says, "Is that a cloaca?" And I
Now,
just
now
look
what's a
at her.
cloaca? I know we've talked about this before, but
We have.
remind me here.
So a cloaca is the single, like, multi-purpose orifice that most animals have, or most vertebrates have. So, it is used in the animals that have it for making babies, peeing, and pooping. It is a multi-purpose orifice.
Yes, that's right.
It splits on the inside. Obviously, it's not all the same tubes. Um, but I just look at her and I was like, "That's an excellent joke. I'm very proud of you." Um, so. Oh, also, I Doug is not actually the person in the suit. It's not the same actor. It's a different guy. And I'm like,
Is it really?
it is. And I was like, man, if I'm doing this, I would want to do it. I'm like, I'm
Right.
good. if I'm going to be the main guy, I'm also going to be the guy in the suit.
And up until this point in the movie, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a whole lot of like shots of like, the hand or the claw or just the head. Like we don't really get a full body shot of, the Velociraptor until
once
this
or twice,
very
but it's
end.
really dark. It's really dark.
Right, real,
I think
real
the
dark,
only
real
time that
quick.
yeah.
Whereas like right here, you get like the full like, oh, this is
It's just a guy running around in a suit, and
right.
it's not good.
Right. Somebody went to a Spirit Halloween on like November 2nd and picked up a discount dinosaur costume, and
See,
here we go.
I think it's much more like they went to a Halloween city on New Year's Day and just crawled around in the dumpster. Like that's the level of suit that this is. But it's still really funny.
Yes.
But so Doug beats all the ninjas. It's just him and the big bad guy. Big bad guy shoots him with an arrow that disables his powers and turns him back to a human. And here is the only bit of like lore or like reason at all for any of this that has happened. So while he's sort of monologuing as villains do, he says that in ancient China, many people could turn into dinosaurs, and that they developed this anti-venom to fight back against them, and that fossils are the remains of that great war. Sure.
Yeah, whatever.
Yep. And so this whole time, he shot Doug in the leg, so he was alive, but he couldn't walk. And so the bad guy walks up to him, about to stab him with a couple of arrows with like the anti-venom, and presumably just stabbing somebody with an arrow is probably enough to kill them. He says, "Any last words?" And Doug says, "Only 6. I think my hands are immune." And because the entire time you couldn't really see his hands. And so his hands were still dinosaur hands. And he reaches up and grabs the neck of big bad guy and just rips his head off, which is now a mannequin head. But this guy had like very big bushy eyebrows and a mustache, or maybe like a soul patch or something, some kind of facial hair. And he is like holding it as there's also a body squirting blood everywhere. So he's drenching himself in blood. Screaming. And there's also, I'm pretty sure the actor for the big bad guy, which was just out of frame, also screaming, because you can also hear the big bad guy screaming, even though it's a mannequin head and a dummy body. And then a Gandhi quote comes on the screen. There's like a still of him covered in blood holding up this mannequin head, and then a Gandhi quote comes on screen. I don't remember what it was. It probably wasn't even by Gandhi.
Something about like the only way to get world peace is to eliminate violence or something to that effect.
Yeah, something to that effect.
Was it actually a Gandhi quote? Who knows? We're not
I have no idea. Yeah, I'm not going to question it. And then, so he drops the head. He won. He defeated the bad guy. And then just says, "Oh, Carol," and runs over to Carol. And then we cut to a hospital. Doug is waiting in the waiting room. Doctor comes in, tells Doug that Carol's fine. And then, while he's explaining this to him, picks up an ashtray, picks a cigarette butt out of it, puts it in his mouth, and lights it up and just smokes it in the waiting room. Like just a cigarette butt that was in an ashtray.
Yep.
As a doctor.
That was a nice subtle
I thought it was really funny. Yeah.
Used. Yeah.
So Carol is fine. Very famously, they reiterate that several times, including with some on-screen text.
Yep.
But I thought it was so funny. So instead of being like an actual like hospital bed, like you would think somebody would be in if they were stabs, they were literally just in like, if you ever went to like the nurse in high school or in elementary school, high school, it was literally like that room. So it's like the normal checkup room with like the wax paper on the bed. And so there was the wax paper. Carol was wearing like a wax paper gown or something, with a blood pressure cuff on, and that's all that she had. She's fine. And, they set off together on a crusade to rid the world of all these evil drug-dealing church
in like a montage
people
at this point.
Yeah, sort of. They don't actually show them doing any of it, but it's sort of like now they have a mission to go do. And Finn. That's this movie. And
Eh,
what was it worth it for us to explain this to you over the last 55 minutes when you could have just watched it because it's an hour 10? No, it wasn't. But was it
Was it
fun?
fun for us though?
It absolutely
Absolutely.
was.
It was worth it for me. It was 100% worth it for me just to be able to do that. It
Yeah,
was. I don't get to watch enough bad movies. I don't watch enough movies in general, but this was. This was just a
so
number one.
good. So good. Um, so really quickly about the dinosaur. So I there's really nothing much interesting to say about the dinosaur since it's literally a guy in a suit. Um, but I do want to point out a couple of things. So one, this was very much not like a velociraptor. It's just it's like a very old school like depiction of like a T-Rex, almost like Godzilla-y, but with a much like longer snoot.
hmm
Um, but like it had very flat, stompy feet. Um, there was like a big hump behind its head, which is probably just where like the person in the suit's head was. I was very confused by how they saw out of the suit. I didn't see any like visible holes or anything.
Yeah, just left that one alone.
But I mean, I was just impressed by this person if they were able to do any choreography, because they did all the fight scenes. So,
Right.
um, but basic incorrect old school dinosaur stuff. The tail was on the ground a lot. Um, and then obviously with the fossils thing that the big bad guy says, that's actually a very
Mhm.
common thing. Maybe not that per se, but people who are creationists who don't believe that the Earth is older than however many thousand years old
Otherwise
that
known as
some
people who
people
are
have said.
wrong.
Right. Um, they it is commonly said by people who believe in those kinds of things that fossils are there from Noah's flood. Like all the animals that are represented as fossils were alive before Noah's flood, and that they died and were killed by the flood and became fossils.
hmm
So that part is at least inspired by, based on something that is said in the real world, not total nonsense. Well, yes, it is total nonsense, but
I was like, it's. I think everything was total nonsense. It's kind of like that disclaimer at the beginning of every South Park. Like any
yeah.
any actual connection to science was a mistake. We didn't mean it. Like this was.
No. And so I thought that there would the reason why I picked this movie. And so, like I said, look up at least the poster for it because it makes it look like there's actually might be like CG in this movie or like an actual like decent fight scene or
Well,
anything. There wasn't. But that's why I picked this movie because I'm like, oh, if they have like a CG dinosaur, I can actually say interesting science things about the dinosaur. Nah, nope, just wasn't the case. Um, so, was there any scientific value to this episode of the podcast?
not even a
No,
little bit.
no, not even a little. Um, but did Mike and I have fun? Yeah, yeah. Like I said, I'm
It
going to
was,
rewatch this movie every now and then because this kind of dumb slapstick almost humor is right up my alley.
and it is best watched with other people. I unfortunately,
Y-
I would watch it alone. If you're together with some buddies, I don't know, next time, maybe at Gavin's wedding, we can we can have a viewing of this or something because I know quite a few people in our friend group that would get quite a kick out of whatever it was that we just spent the last hour talking about.
Absolutely. So that's going to be it for this episode. If you're still here, I appreciate you. I don't understand why you're still here.
Next week we're getting back to some hardcore science.
Yes,
I don't
we
know what
are.
it is,
So
but Gavin will do it for us.
I sure will. It's going to be rather dense, actually, but it was a recommended topic. So here we are.
And here we will be next week. But for now, this has been episode 57 of I Wish You Were Dead, a podcast about things that used to be alive. My name is Mike, and that is Gavin, and we will see you next Wednesday.